You see, something's going to happen.
What? What's going to happen?
Something wonderful.
What?
I understand how you feel. You see, it's all very clear to me now.
Welcome to the Occult Rejects. In this episode, I will be discussing Marsilio Ficino. Ficino was part priest, part magician, and part metaphysician. Someone who believed the cosmos was alive, structured, and full of hidden influences. He wasn't just a translator of Plato or some Renaissance philosopher tucked into a textbook. He thought the stars affected the soul, that music could heal the spirit, and that death was just a shift in frequency, an exit from the material plane into something higher. He brought astrology, Neoplatonism, Christian mysticism, and ancient ritual together in a coherent system of spiritual ascent. The reason I want to talk about him now is because a lot of people today are waking up to the idea that there's more going on beneath the surface. Psychologically, spiritually, cosmically, and magically. Ficino understood that, and he gave us the tools to navigate it. This episode is a look into his system, his beliefs about death and the soul, and why his work still matters for anyone walking the path between philosophy and the occult. Marsilio Ficino was born in Figline Valdarno, a small town near Florence, Italy, with records suggesting a birth date of October 19th, 1433. His father, Dio Tifici Diagnolo Ficino, was a physician who worked under Cosimo de' Medici, a prominent figure in Renaissance Florence. This relationship is noted in sources highlighting the father's role in connecting Ficino to the Medici family. Ficino's father's profession and Medici connection provided him with access to intellectual circles, shaping his path as a philosopher. Some say his father may have also influenced Ficino's later works on medicine and astrology, such as the 3 books on life. His mother, Alessandro di Nannoccio, is mentioned as the daughter of a Florentine citizen, but details about her are limited. Information about his siblings, grandparents, or extended family is also not easily available to find. Ficino's intellectual development likely started at home, as was typical for children of his social class in the 15th century in Italy. His father was a physician, and this connection to the medical profession may have provided an early influence on Ficino's curiosity about the sciences and humanities. Not much is known about his childhood education. Going by where he grew up and the time he did, he would have encountered the medieval curriculum centered on the trivium and the quadrivium. The trivium, grammar, rhetoric, and logic. Quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. These subjects were standard for boys of his standing. In his teenage years, Ficino advanced to the University of Florence, a hub of humanist learning during the Renaissance. At the university, his studies included philosophy, exploring the ideas of ancient thinkers, theology, engaging with Christian doctrine, which he later synthesized with philosophical traditions, medicine, reflecting his father's profession and the Renaissance interest in the human body, and also Latin and Greek literature, mastering classical languages to understand original texts. He also studied under prominent humanists, such as Cristoforo Landino, a scholar of classical literature who deepened Ficino's appreciation for Latin and Greek works. As Ficino's teacher in Florence, Landino introduced him to classical literature, rhetoric, and philosophy. Landino's teachings provided Ficino with the tools to understand ancient texts, influencing his approach to interpreting Plato and other philosophers. Landino definitely helped shape Ficino's early intellectual development. John Argyropoulos, if I'm saying that correctly, Byzantine, who introduced him to Greek philosophy, particularly the works of Plato and Aristotle. Ficino was so impressed with Plato's work, he translated Plato's entire corpus into Latin, a big accomplishment that made these works accessible to Western Europe during the Renaissance. From Plato's dialogues, Ficino adopted the concept of the immortality of the soul, the theory of ideal forms, and the notion of love as a transformative force. In his commentary on Plato's Symposium, Ficino developed the concept of Platonic love, a spiritual, non-physical love that elevates the soul towards contemplation of divine beauty and ultimately to God. This idea became a staple of his thought, blending philosophical inquiry with a mystical ascent. When it came to Aristotle's influence, that was more oppositional, helping Ficino define his Platonist stance by comparing it with the prevailing scholastic tradition. Argyropoulos, in particular, was big in shaping Ficino's philosophical perspective, guiding him towards the study of Plato's dialogues and influencing his lifelong commitment to Greek thought. After his formal education, Ficino took to self-study, diving deeper into Platonism and Neoplatonism. He studied the writings of figures like Plotinus, Porphyry, and Proclus, I'm saying those right, whose metaphysical ideas influenced his own philosophical framework. He took to the Neoplatonic concept of the One, a supreme unified source of all existence, from which reality emanates in a hierarchical structure, descending from the divine to the material world. This influenced Ficino's view of the universe as a series of interconnected levels, with the human soul capable of ascending back to the divine through knowledge, love, and contemplation. In his book, Platonic Theology, he shows this synthesis, arguing for the soul's immortality and its potential for divine union. He was also inspired by Renaissance figures and earlier humanists Petrarch and Boccaccio. Their focus on studying ancient texts in their original languages and valuing classical literature inspired Ficino. This encouraged him to translate and interpret ancient works. As a Christian priest and philosopher, Ficino was deeply influenced by Christian theology, particularly the works of Augustine, who had previously integrated Platonic concepts into Christian doctrine. St. Augustine integrated Platonic philosophy with Christian theology, emphasizing the soul's immortality and its journey to God. His works, such as The City of God, provided a model for Ficino's own efforts to harmonize Platonism with Christianity. Augustine's focus on divine love and the soul's ascent influenced Ficino's theological writings, reinforcing his belief in the compatibility of pagan wisdom and Christian doctrine. Dionysius the Areopagites, writings on negative theology, describing God by what he is not, and the soul's ascent through a celestial hierarchy, inspired Ficino's mystical ideas. His emphasis on divine transcendence and spiritual union shaped Ficino's conception of the soul's ultimate goal, merging with the divine through contemplation and love. Besides philosophy, Ficino also studied astrology, understanding the influence of celestial bodies on human affairs, magic, examining esoteric practices tied to natural and divine forces, and Hermeticism, studying texts attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, which blended mysticism with philosophy. Hermeticism deepened Ficino's philosophy with mystical and occult dimensions. The Hermetic emphasis on the divinity of humanity and the possibility of spiritual regeneration resonated with his views on the soul's ability to ascend to the divine. Also, Hermeticism's focus on astrology and natural magic influenced Ficino's belief in the interconnectedness of the cosmos, bringing him to explore how celestial forces could affect human life and how they may or might be harnessed for spiritual forces. This interest also tied into his concept of psychotheologia, the idea of a primordial wisdom shared across ancient traditions, including Platonism and Christianity. Ancient medical and astrological writers like Galen and Ptolemy influenced Ficino's interest in medicine and astrology. In his book De Vita, he referred to Galen, a physician, and Ptolemy, an astronomer and an astrologer. The writings on health, the influence of the stars, and the interconnectedness of the cosmos helped mold Ficino's holistic view on human well-being. These influences led Ficino to blend philosophy with practical disciplines, advocating for a balance of body, mind, and spirit guided by celestial forces. Collectively, these influences came together in Ficino's thought, leading him to develop a unique philosophical system that blended Platonic, Neoplatonic, Christian, and Hermetic elements. Plato and Neoplatonists provided the intellectual core, while Christian thinkers like Augustine and Pseudo-Dionysius allowed Ficino to align this philosophy with his faith. The Hermetic tradition added an esoteric dimension and Renaissance humanist. Along with his teacher Landino and patron Cosimo, he provided the cultural and practical support for his work. As said earlier, Ficino's intellectual career was greatly enhanced by the patronage of the Medici family. Cosimo de' Medici, recognizing Ficino's talent, provided financial and social support, enabling him to focus on scholarship. Around 1462, this backing allowed Ficino to establish the Platonic Academy in Florence. Though not a formal institution, the Academy was a gathering place for scholars, philosophers, and artists interested in Platonic ideas. Here, Ficino translated Plato's dialogues into Latin, making them widely accessible in Western Europe. He authored original works such as Theologia Platonica, blending Platonic philosophy with Christian thought. He taught and mentored others, which solidified his role as a leading intellectual. And now, we will actually start to get into some of his writings. The first book we will be discussing translates to Platonic Theology on the Immortality of the Soul, and it explores the synthesis of Platonism and Christian theology, focusing particularly on the immortality of the soul. Written between 1469 and 1474, and published in 1482, it is an 18-book philosophical treatise that is known as his magnum opus. Rooted in Renaissance humanism, it seeks to reconcile Platonism and Neoplatonism with Christian theology, presenting a rational defense on the soul's immortality. Ficino aimed this work at the intellectual elites of Florence, countering materialist philosophies like Epicureanism and Averroism, while competing with the non-Christian Platonism of Proclus. Ficino began by dedicating the work to Lorenzo de' Medici, framing it as a response to the growing separation of philosophy and religion. He fears intellectuals are losing faith in the soul's immortality, a belief he considers essential for human dignity and salvation. Book 1 outlines the misery of human life if the soul were immortal, arguing that natural human desires for eternity reflect a divine purpose. And a quote by him, "If man were mortal, there would be no animal more miserable than he. Endowed as he is with such great gifts of intellect and will, yet destined to perish entirely." With metaphysical frameworks in books 2 through 5, Ficino constructs a Neoplatonic hierarchy of being, positioning the soul at the center of a 5-part cosmos: God, angelic beings, the rational soul, qualities, and bodies. The soul's intermediary role makes it the copula mundi, bond of the universe, linking the divine and the material realms. Books 2 through 3 explore the soul's nature as self-moving and immaterial, drawing on Plato's Phaedo and Plotinus. Books 4 through 5 argue that the soul's desire for truth and God, unattainable fully in this life, proves its immortality, as nature does not implant vain desires. And another quote by him: "The soul, while it governs bodies, adheres to the divine. This is the greatest miracle in nature." And that's from Book 4, Chapter 2. In Book 4, Chapter 2, Ficino cites Plato, Augustine, and Origen to argue that the soul's natural yearning for the highest truth, or God, implies an afterlife where this desire is fulfilled. And in quotation, "Since neither this knowledge nor this happiness can be attained in the present life, they must be attained in the next." And that is paraphrased from Luke Dietz's summary. In books 6 through 11, he presents arguments for immortality. Book 6 refutes materialist views that reduce the soul to the body. Books 7 through 8 argue that the soul's intellectual capacities, its ability to grasp universal truths, transcend bodily limits. And books 9 through 11 explore the soul's unity and indivisibility, asserting that its simplicity ensures it cannot dissolve like composite matter. In books 12 through 16, he touches on the soul's ascent and destiny. Ficino shifts to the soul's spiritual journey, emphasizing contemplation and love as paths to divine union. Books 12 through 14 describe the soul's ascent through philosophical meditation, echoing Plato's Republic, cave allegory, and Phaedo. Book 15 argues that the soul's moral and intellectual virtues prepare it for immortality, while Book 16 critiques Aristotelian ambiguities on the soul, favoring Plato's clarity. Ficino sees the soul capable of transcending matter through love, a cosmic force harmonizing all existence. And a quote from him: "Through love, the soul ascends to God, contemplating the good and the beautiful until it is united with the divine source." And that's from Book 14, Chapter 7. Book 17 and 18 bring together Ficino's arguments, aligning Platonism with Christianity. He interprets Plato's ideas as prefiguring Christian truths, citing figures like Dionysus the Areopagite. Book 17 refutes objections, like from avarice, who deny personal immortality, while Book 18 envisions the soul's eternal reward in God's presence. Ficino concludes that philosophy and religion converge in affirming the soul's divine origin and destiny. This book is a landmark of Renaissance philosophy. It counters Aristotelian scholastics and materialist trends with a vision of the soul as a cosmos' vital center, immortal by nature and oriented toward God. Ficino's fusion of reason and faith influenced thinkers like Pico di Mirandola and Giordano Bruno, shaping early modern philosophy. And the next book is De Amore, a commentary on Plato's Symposium. This book delves into the concept of Platonic love, examining the nature of beauty and affection through a philosophical lens. Written in 1469, this work reimagines the nature of love through a dialogue among Ficino's contemporaries, each representing a speaker from Plato's text while integrating Platonic philosophy with Christian theology and Neoplatonic metaphysics. This book is structured as a philosophical dialogue, mirroring the banquet setting of Plato's Symposium. Ficino assigns 7 of his Florentine friends to deliver speeches, each corresponding to a character from Plato's text, though he adapts their arguments to fit his Renaissance context. Each speech builds on the last to explore love's cosmic, human, and divine dimensions. Ficino's central aim is to present love as a unifying principle that connects the material world to the divine, blending Platonic eros with the Christian agape. Ficino opens with Landino establishing love as a divine cosmic force that permeates and sustains the universe. Drawing on Plato's Phaedrus, he portrays love as a foundational bond that holds all creation together, transcending human emotion to become a universal principle. In a quote, "Love is the perpetual knot and link of the universe, the immovable support of its parts, and the firm foundation of the whole machine." That is from Book 1, Chapter 2. In Book 2, we have Antonio Agli representing, oh man, I don't even know how to say this, Eryximachus, or Eryximachus, who knows, Eryximachus. And he expands on love's harmonizing role, arguing that it governs both human relationships and the natural world by reconciling opposites. He introduces a key distinction. Divine love is the source of all things, while human love is its reflection, setting up Ficino's later synthesis of human and divine experiences. And a quote from that, "Divine love is the cause of all things, and human love is its effect and image." From Book 2, Chapter 3. Book 3, we have Tommaso Bensi, and he's representing Aristophanes, if I'm saying that right. And he reinterprets Plato's myth of the androgyne, where humans, originally whole, were split into halves and now seek reunion through love. For Ficino, this symbolizes the soul's longing to reconnect with its divine essence, with beauty acting as the catalyst for the desire. And a quote we have for that, "Beauty is the splendor of the divine countenance, the image of which is reflected in the mirror of created things." This is Book 3, Chapter 2. Now in Book 4, we have Cristoforo Marsupini, representing Pausanias. And he distinguishes between two forms of love, vulgar love, rooted in physical attraction, and celestial love, which elevates the soul towards spiritual beauty. This dualism introduces Ficino's ladder of love, a progression from sensory desire to divine contemplation. And a quote for that, "There are two kinds of love. One is celestial, the other vulgar. The celestial love is that which is aroused by the beauty of the soul, the vulgar by the beauty of the body." Book 4, Chapter 1. And now in Book 5, we have Carlo Marsupini, representing Agathon, and he explores love's transformative power, arguing that it inspires courage, virtue, and artistic creation. Love, when directed toward noble ends, elevates human potential and aligns the soul with higher ideals. And a quote for that, "Love is the master of all arts and the inventor of all things." Book 5, Chapter 2. And now in Book 6, we have Giovanni Cavalcanti representing Socrates, and he presents Ficino's famous ladder of love. Here, using Socrates and Diotima, he describes how love begins with physical beauty, but ascends through stages. Love of all beautiful bodies, then beautiful souls, and finally divine beauty itself. This ascent reflects the soul's journey towards God. And a quote, "Love is desire of beauty, but beauty is a certain splendor which draws the human soul to itself. This splendor shines first in those spiritual forms which the intellect contemplates, then in the sensible forms which the eyes perceive." That is Book 6, Chapter 8. Book 7, we have Bernardo Nuzzi representing Alcibiades, and he's praising Socrates, linking love to the soul's immortality. Love is the soul's yearning to return to its celestial homeland, a Neoplatonic idea of spiritual homecoming. And I quote, Love is born from the soul's desire to return to its celestial homeland, to that blessed state from which it has fallen. That is Book 7, Chapter 2. Oh, Chapter 4. My bad. Written for Florence's intellectual elite, D'Amore reflects Ficino's role as a leader of the Platonic Academy, aiming to reconcile pagan philosophy with Christian faith. D'Amore profoundly influenced Renaissance thought, shaping ideas about love, beauty, and the soul's relationship to the divine. Its ladder of love became a metaphor for spiritual and artistic aspiration, impacting figures like Pico di Mirandola and later Romantic poets. The work exemplifies Renaissance humanism blend of classical revival and Christian spirituality. And now we have De Vita Libri Tres, translated as 3 Books on Life. This work offers practical advice on living well, blending philosophy, medicine, and astrology to address physical, intellectual, and spiritual health. Published in 1849, it is a landmark work of Renaissance humanism that combines medicine, astrology, philosophy, and magic into a holistic guide for health, longevity, and spiritual well-being. This treatise reflects his deep engagement with Platonic and Neoplatonic thought, as well as his mission to harmonize ancient wisdom with Christian theology. Aimed particularly at scholars prone to melancholy, the work is divided into 3 distinct books, one on healthy life, one on a long life, and one on obtaining life from the heavens. In De Vita Sana, on a healthy life, the focus is maintaining physical and mental health with particular emphasis on preventing melancholy in scholars, with key themes on moderation in diet and lifestyle, humoral balance, and the role of environment and emotions and well-being. In De Vita Sana, Ficino tackles the health challenges faced by intellectuals whose sedentary and contemplative lives make them susceptible to melancholy, a condition linked to an excess of black bile and humoral theory. He advocates for a balanced approach to diet, exercise, and mental tranquility to maintain the equilibrium of the body's 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. And a quote from that: "The studious should avoid all foods that are too dry, too hot, or too cold, for these increase black bile." Book 1, Chapter 4. This dietary advice reflects Ficino's reliance on humoral theory, aiming to prevent the buildup of black bile through careful food choices. Ficino also emphasizes the importance of a supportive environment and emotional health. He recommends clean air, sunlight, and soothing influences like music and pleasant scents to uplift the spirit and sustain vitality. In a quote, "Let your dwelling be in a clean and sweet air, open to the sky, receiving much sun, but especially let it be where the south wind blows, and where there is always a gentle breeze." Book 1, Chapter 6. Here, Ficino highlights the therapeutic power of nature, aligning physical surroundings with inner health. Next, in De Vita Longa, on a long life, the focus is extending life and mitigating the effects of aging, with key themes on replenishing vital forces, herbal remedies, and the principle of moderation. In De Vita Longa, Ficino shifts his attention to longevity, exploring how to slow the aging process and prolong life. He views aging as the depletion of the body's natural heat and moisture, a process that can be countered through diet, herbs, and a balanced lifestyle. In a quote, "Old age is nothing but a dryness and coldness of the body, brought on by the wasting away of natural heat and moisture." And that is Book 2, Chapter 1. Ficino suggests a diet of moist and warm foods, such as broths, light wines, and select fruits, along with rejuvenating herbs like sage and rosemary. He also advocates for moderate exercise and a cheerful outlook to sustain bodily vigor. And in quotes, "The secret to a long life lies in living in harmony with nature and avoiding excess. Book 2, Chapter 5. Echoing the Renaissance ideal of the golden mean, this statement encapsulates Ficino's belief that balance is the cornerstone of a long, healthy life. Beyond physical care, Ficino emphasizes the value of intellectual engagement and emotional resilience, framing longevity as a holistic endeavor rooted in natural harmony. And then finally, on obtaining life from the heavens, the focus is enhancing life through celestial influences and spiritual practices, with key themes on astrology, talismans, music, and the Neoplatonic concept of the anima mundi, the world soul. The third book is the most esoteric, delving into the use of astrology and magic to draw vitality from the cosmos. Ficino hypothesizes that human health and spirit are linked to celestial forces, which can be harnessed through rituals, talismans, and harmonious activities like music. And in quotes, just as the heavens are the cause of life, so they are the cause of health. And just as they give life to all things, they can restore it. Book 2, Chapter 1. This foundational idea reflects Ficino's Neoplatonic view of the cosmos as a living, interconnected system that sustains human life. Ficino provides practical instructions for aligning with planetary energies, such as crafting talismans under specific astrological conditions. He associates materials like gold with the sun to capture its life-giving power. And in quotes, if you wish to capture the spirit of the sun, make an image of gold in the hour of the sun, when it is in its exaltation, and inscribe upon it the figure of a king seated on a throne. Book 3, Chapter 13. This detailed ritual exemplifies Ficino's blend of astrology and magic, offering a tangible method to tap into celestial vitality. Music and contemplation also play key roles, serving as conduits for cosmic harmony. Ficino sees these practices as ways to elevate the soul and achieve spiritual unity with the divine. And in quotes, music, more than anything else, imitates the celestial harmony and can therefore draw down the celestial influences into the soul. Book 3, Chapter 21. This highlights music's dual role as a healing tool and a spiritual bridge, aligning the individual with the heavens. Obtaining Life from the Heavens stands out for its bold integration of esoteric traditions, pushing the boundaries of Renaissance thought into the realm of the mystical. The book merges medicine, astrology, philosophy, and magic, embodying the Renaissance ideal of comprehensive knowledge. Each book balances actionable advice with deeper reflection on life's purpose and the soul's connection to the cosmos. Davida Libre Trace influenced Renaissance and early modern thought, shaping the works of figures like Paracelsus and Cornelius Agrippa. Its fusion of medicine and magic contributed to the evolution of occult traditions, while its focus on balance resonated with humanist values. The third book, with its astrological emphasis, stirred controversy and drew scrutiny from the church, yet it solidified Ficino's reputation as a daring thinker. Today, the treatise remains as a testament to the Renaissance quest for wisdom and a life well lived. As we move on, last but not least, we have Epistolae, a collection of Ficino's letters. This compilation contains philosophical discussion and insights, reflecting his exchanges with other scholars and his personal reflections on various topics. Written between 1457 and 1495, these letters were compiled and published in 12 books during Ficino's lifetime. They offer profound insights into Renaissance humanism, Neoplatonism, and Ficino's role as a central intellectual figure in Florence. Ficino's Epistolae is not merely a personal correspondence, but a deliberate philosophical project. Many letters were composed as open treaties intended to circulate among Florence's intellectual elite, including patrons like Lorenzo di Medici and fellow scholars like Pico della Mirandola. The letters cover a vast range of subjects from metaphysics and ethics to health and friendship, reflecting Ficino's mission to revive Platonic wisdom with a Christian framework. As Ficino himself wrote, the letters are a kind of commentary on my life and thought. From Book 1, Letter 1. Ficino's letters often explore abstract concepts such as the nature of the soul, the pursuit of wisdom, and the relationship between humanity and the divine. These reflections are steeped in Platonic and Neoplatonic ideas, emphasizing the soul's immortality and its journey toward God. In a letter to Giovanni Cavalcanti on the soul's ascent, in Book 1, Letter 8, Ficino describes the soul's ascent through love and knowledge, a central theme in his philosophy. And in quotes, "The soul, my dear Giovanni, is like a winged chariot, striving to rise to the divine banquet, but often weighed down by earthly concerns. Through love and wisdom, it can shed these burdens and soar to the heavens." In another letter to Lorenzo di Medici on divine frenzy, from Book 2, Letter 5, Ficino discusses the concept of divine frenzy, inspired madness, which elevates the soul to prophetic and poetic heights. And in quotes, "Divine frenzy, Lorenzo, is the light of inspiration sent from heaven, a holy madness by which the soul is wrapped above itself and beholds the eternal truths." In another letter to Bernardo Bembo on the nature of God, Book 3, Letter 12, Ficino reflects on God as the ultimate unity and source of all being, cornerstone of Neoplatonic metaphysics. And in quotes, "God is the infinite and indivisible one, from whom all things emanate like rays from the sun, and to whom all things return." These letters reveal Ficino's deep engagement with Platonic theology, positioning the soul as a bridge between the material and divine realms. Ficino frequently offers guidance on living a virtuous life, maintaining health, and cultivating friendship. His advice blends philosophical principles with practical wisdom, reflecting his belief in philosophy as a way of life. In a letter to Antonio Ivani on moderation, Book 4, Letter 3, Ficino emphasizes the importance of the golden mean in all aspects of life, from diet to emotions. And in quotes, "Moderation, my friend, is the key to health and happiness. Avoid excess in all things, for it is the mother of disease and discontent." Then, in a letter to Francesco Bandini on friendship, Book 5, Letter 7, Ficino extols friendship as a sacred bond that mirrors the divine love uniting all creation. And in quotes, "True friendship is a harmony of souls, a mutual affection rooted in virtue and wisdom. It is the earthly image of divine love." Other letters provide glimpses into Ficino's own experiences, struggles, and aspirations. In this letter to Cosimo di Medici on his calling, Book 1, Letter 1, Ficino recounts his sense of divine mission to revive Platonic wisdom. And in quotes, "From my mouth, I have felt a calling to restore the ancient wisdom of Plato, to illuminate the path to truth for my fellow man." Also, in a letter to Giovanni Nessi on melancholy, Book 7, Letter 4, Ficino reflects on his own battles with melancholy, a condition he believed afflicted scholars. And in quotes, "Melancholy, that dark companion of the studious, has often visited me, but through music, prayer, and the company of friends, I have found solace." Next, in this letter to Angelo Poliziano on the joys of contemplation, Book 8, Letter 9, Ficino shares the profound joy he finds in philosophical meditation. And in quotes, "In contemplation, I find a pleasure surpassing all earthly delights, a foretaste of the eternal bliss that awaits the soul." These personal reflections humanize Ficino, connecting his philosophical ideals to lived experience. Ficino's correspondence with other scholars highlight the vibrant intellectual community of Renaissance Florence and his role as a mentor and collaborator. Ficino's correspondence with other scholars highlights the vibrant intellectual community of Renaissance Florence and his role as a mentor and collaborator. In a letter to Pico della Mirandola in The Unity of Truth, Book 9, Letter 6, Ficino praises Pico's syncretic approach to philosophy and theology. In quotes, "You, Pico, have shown that all wisdom, whether from Plato or Aristotle, from Moses or the Magi, converges upon a single truth." Also, a letter to Johannes Reuchlin on the study of Hebrew, Book 10, Letter 3, Ficino encourages Reuchlin's efforts to study Hebrew scriptures reflecting the Renaissance interest in original texts. And in quotes, "The Hebrew language, Johannes, is a key to unlocking the mysteries of the divine word, a bridge to the ancient wisdom of the prophets." Next, in this letter to Armolao Barbaro, in the translation of Plato, Book 11, Letter 8, Ficino discusses the challenges and rewards of translating Plato into Latin. And in quotes, "Translating Plato is like capturing a fleeting melody. One must strive to preserve its harmony while rendering it a new tongue." These exchanges illustrate Ficino's engagement with the leading minds of his time, fostering a shared pursuit of knowledge. Ficino's epistolae influenced Renaissance thought, shaping the philosophical landscape of the period. His letters disseminated Platonic ideas across Europe, inspiring figures like Erasmus and more. The collection also exemplifies the Renaissance ideal of the philosopher as a guide to both wisdom and virtue, bridging the gap between ancient knowledge and contemporary life. And now, in the rest of this episode, I will discuss some of Ficino's ideas on a few things, including Saturn, music, the eyes, and more. We will begin with Ficino's concept of Saturn. Ficino viewed Saturn as a planet and symbol embodying duality and extremes. Traditionally, Saturn was associated with melancholy, limitation, and hardship, qualities Ficino acknowledged and experienced personally given Saturn's prominent placement in his own birth chart. However, he reframed these negative attributes as pathways to profound intellectual and spiritual insight. For Ficino, Saturn's influence could afflict individuals with melancholia, but the same melancholy, when properly managed, became a catalyst for genius, contemplation, and divine connection. This reflects Saturn's role as both a malefic force and a higher transcendent power. In Ficino's philosophical system, Saturn held a significant place within the Neoplatonic hierarchy of being. Drawing heavily from Plotinus, Ficino identified Saturn with the cosmic mind, the second level of reality emanating from the One, or God. In this schema, Saturn represents the intellectual heaven, a realm of pure contemplation traversed by the world soul under Zeus, as depicted in Plato's Phaedrus. Ficino saw Saturn as the highest planet, symbolizing the pinnacle of rational and divine thought, which elevates the soul beyond the material world toward the eternal. Ficino's association of Saturn with melancholy was both personal and theoretical. Like I mentioned earlier in his De Vita Libre Trace, 3 books on life, particularly the first book, De Vita Sana, he explored how Saturn's influence predisposed scholars and intellectuals to black bile, a condition he linked to deep introspection and creativity. He argued that the Saturnine temperament, while burdensome, allowed individuals to transcend mundane concerns and grasp the highest things. This idea built on the medieval tradition of humoral theory and astrology, where Saturn governed the melancholic temperament, but Ficino elevated it into a positive intellectual virtue. Some quotes. "Saturn seems to have impressed the seal of melancholy on me from the beginning. Saturn, the highest of the planets, inclines those born under him to contemplation and melancholy. The melancholic humor which Saturn bestows is the temperament of philosophers and prophets. An aspect of Ficino's Saturn is its role in his critique of the Islamic philosophers Averroes. In his magnum opus, Platonic Theology, in Book 15, Ficino rejected his doctrine of the unicity of the ancient intellect, the idea that there is a single universal intellect shared by all humans. Ficino identified this agent intellect with Saturn, but he reframed it with a Christian Neoplatonic context, arguing for individuals' intellects united in their ascent toward God rather than a singular impersonal entity. In the third book of De Vita, Ficino explored Saturn's role in astral magic, suggesting that its celestial influence could be harnessed for therapeutic purposes. He proposed that by aligning oneself with Saturn's energy through diet, music, talismans, and contemplation, one could mitigate its malefic effects and draw down its intellectual gifts. This practical application of Saturn's power reflects Ficino's belief that the heavens are not external forces to be feared but are mirrored within the human soul, a concept he expressed as the heavens in their entirety are within us. Ficino's concept of Saturn was not an original invention but a synthesis of diverse intellectual traditions filtered through his Renaissance humanist lens. Ficino's primary philosophical inspiration came from Plato, whose works he translated into Latin, and the Neoplatonists, especially Plotinus. In Plato's Phaedrus, Ficino found the imagery of the soul's ascent through the intellectual heaven, which he associated with Saturn as the realm of the mind. Plotinus's concept of the nous, N-O-U-S, as the first emanation from the One provided the metaphysical foundation for Ficino's identification of Saturn with divine intellect. Ficino drew heavily from Arabic astrological texts, which were widely available in Latin translation during the Renaissance. Works like those of Abu Marsar and the Picatrix shaped his understanding of Saturn as a planet of extremes. The Picatrix, in particular, influenced Ficino's ideas about astral magic and the correspondences between Saturn and qualities like melancholy, scholarship, and solitude. Ficino's translation of the Corpus Hermeticum reinforced his view of Saturn as a bridge between the material and divine. The Hermetic texts emphasized the unity of the cosmos and the human soul, aligning with Ficino's beliefs that Saturn's influence could be internalized and transformed into a source of wisdom. Ficino also inherited the Roman mythological view of Saturn as a deity of agriculture in the Golden Age, as well as the medieval astrological tradition that cast Saturn as the greater malefic. He also engaged with Aristotle via Averroes, though he critiqued the latter's interpretation. These traditions provided the raw material that Ficino reshaped into a more ambivalent and spiritually elevated figure. Born with Saturn on his ascendant, Ficino's own life informed his ideas. His struggles with melancholy and his identity as a contemplative scholar led him to see Saturn as a personal archetype, a force that both challenged and enriched his existence. And here are a few more quotes about Saturn by Ficino. Saturn, the planet of contemplation, grants the gifts of profound thought and understanding. The influence of Saturn leads the soul towards the highest truths, away from the distraction of the senses. Under Saturn's guidance, the mind descends to the realm of pure ideas, transcending the material world. Saturn, as the guardian of the soul, teaches us to detach from worldly desires and seek the eternal. The Saturnian soul is one that seeks wisdom above all else, often at the cost of worldly pleasures. Through Saturn's influence, the soul learns the value of solitude and introspection. In the natal chart, Saturn's position reveals the challenges and lessons one must face in life. Saturn's aspect to other planets can indicate the areas where discipline and perseverance are required. A strong Saturn in the horoscope often signifies a life dedicated to serious pursuits and deep learning. In alchemy, Saturn is associated with lead, the base metal that must be transformed into gold. The alchemical process mirrors the soul's journey under Saturn, from darkness to light, from ignorance to wisdom. Saturn's influence in alchemy teaches patience and the value of slow, deliberate transformation. In mythology, Saturn is the god of time, reminding us of the fleeting nature of life and in the importance of using time wisely. Saturn's myth of devouring his children symbolizes the destructive aspect of time, but also the necessity of letting go of the old to make way for the new. The golden age under Saturn's rule represents a time of wisdom and prosperity, achievable through discipline and virtue. Saturn's influence can be seen in the works of great artists, who often channel their melancholy into profound beauty. The Saturnian artist is one who contemplates the mysteries of life and death, creating works that reflect the eternal. Saturn governs the bones and the spleen, and its influence can lead to ailments of a chronic nature. Those with a strong Saturn must guard against melancholy and lethargy, but they can also cultivate resilience and longevity. And that wraps up Saturn. And now we will move on to Ficino's esoteric view of music. Ficino's perspective on music was rooted in a blend of philosophy, mysticism, and spirituality. He saw it as a powerful force with several key dimensions. Ficino embraced the ancient Greek concept of the music of the spheres, the idea that the planets and stars produce an inaudible harmony as they move through the heavens. He believed that earthly music could mirror these celestial patterns, enabling humans to align themselves with the universe's divine order. For Ficino, the human soul was a microcosm of the greater universe. He thought that music, with its rhythms and melodies, could resonate with the soul, tuning it to the cosmic harmonies and fostering spiritual balance and elevation. Ficino practiced musical therapy, asserting that music could restore harmony to the soul and, in turn, heal physical and mental ailments. He linked specific musical tones to planetary influences, suggesting that certain melodies could counteract the melancholic effects associated with Saturn. Music, in Ficino's view, could induce a state of divine frenzy, an ecstatic experience where the musician or listener tapped into higher realms of creativity and spiritual insight. He saw this as akin to the inspiration of poets and prophets, a direct connection to the divine. In essence, Ficino viewed music as a mystical language capable of healing, inspiring, and linking humanity to the transcendent structure of the cosmos. And in quotes, "Through music, the soul can rise to higher realms of consciousness. Medicine heals the body, music the spirit, theology the soul." And now, we will talk a little bit about Ficino's thoughts about the eyes. Ficino regarded the eyes as essential to human interaction with the world, extending our capacities beyond the merely physical. He metaphorically described the eyes as part of the tools and auxiliaries that enhance human powers, likening their role to adding feet and hands and eyes and blood to our abilities. For Ficino, they are integral to the human experience, amplifying our ability to connect with both the tangible and intangible aspects of existence. Drawing from Neoplatonic and Aristotelian influences, Ficino rejected materialist theories of vision that theorized a physical transfer from objects to the eye. Instead, he argued that vision occurs through light, which he viewed as an immaterial spiritual substance. In his commentary on Plato's Symposium, Ficino explains that beauty captivates the soul, not through the body's material form, but through an incorporeal image perceived by sight. He explains this by noting that the tiny pupil could not contain the vastness of the heavens if vision were a corporeal process. Thus, the eyes, as receivers of light, become conduits for spiritual illumination, linking the soul to divine truths and elevating sight to a metaphysical act. Ficino's philosophy of love, also explored in De Amore, places the eyes at the heart of romantic and spiritual connection. He believed that the gaze between lovers could transmit profound emotional and spiritual forces, both positive and negative. Ficino references the concept of the evil eye, suggesting that lovers' mutual gaze could lead to a form of bewitchment or even harm, describing the eyes as the cause and origin of this disease of love. This highlights his view of the eyes as powerful conduits through which souls influence one another, capable of forging deep bonds or conveying affliction, reflecting the Renaissance fascination with the potency of sight. Ficino often used the eyes symbolically to represent different levels of perception and knowledge. In his commentary on Plato's Philebus, he cites a Greek saying that Plato possessed 3 eyes, one for human affairs, one for natural phenomena, and one for divine matters. This metaphor underscores Ficino's belief that the eyes signify not just physical vision, but the soul's capacity to comprehend multiple realms of existence. These 3 eyes illustrate a hierarchy of understanding, from the mundane to the celestial, positioning the eyes as emblems of intellectual and spiritual insight in Ficino's thought. Central to Ficino's philosophy is the idea that the eyes connect the material and spiritual worlds. He linked this to the concept of spirit, or spiritus, a subtle vapor produced by the heart that mediates between the soul and body, enabling sensory experiences like sight. The eyes, in this framework, are more than biological organs. They are gateways through which the soul perceives the external world and accesses divine beauty and truth. This aligns with Ficino's Neoplatonic view of the soul's ascent from the material to the divine, with the eyes facilitating this journey by apprehending beauty as a reflection of God's perfection. In his treatise, Quid Sit Lumen, Ficino poetically describes the heavens. In quotes, "When the divinities are happy, the celestial bodies that are like their eyes laugh, shine, and move, overwhelmed by joy." Ficino's thoughts on the eyes are deeply rooted in his revival of Neoplatonism and his work on Platonic theology. As a translator of Plato and other classical authors, he sought to reconcile pagan philosophy with Christian doctrine, viewing the eyes as instruments of both earthly perception and spiritual contemplation. His leadership in the Renaissance intellectual movement emphasized the human being as a reflection of the divine, and the eyes as the windows to the soul embodied this duality. They allowed individuals to experience the material world while simultaneously offering a pathway to transcendent understanding. And now we'll move on and talk a little bit about the brain. Marsilio Ficino had a unique and influential perspective on the human brain, shaped by a synthesis of classical philosophy, Christian theology, and early medical science. His thoughts on the brain cannot be neatly separated from his overall metaphysical and anthropological views, especially his ideas about the soul, intellect, imagination, and the body. Ficino, drawing on ancient sources like Plato, Aristotle, Galen, and particularly Plotinus, viewed the brain as a critical intermediary between the soul and the body. He also believed the soul is not located in the brain, but rather is immaterial and divine, descending from the world of ideas. To Ficino, the brain is the organ through which certain faculties of the soul, especially the imaginative, rational, and sensory faculties, manifest in the body. He aligned this with the tripartite model of the soul, the rational, spirited, and appetitive. The brain is therefore associated with rational and imaginative aspects. Ficino also incorporated the concept of spiritus, a subtle, vaporous substance believed to mediate between soul and body. And in quotes, spirit is defined by doctors as a vapor of blood, pure, subtle, hot, and clear. After being generated by the heat of the heart out of the more subtle blood, it flies to the brain, and there the soul uses it continually for the exercise of the interior as well as the exterior senses. And that is from the 3 Books of Life. He adopted a tripartite model of the spirits, rooted in ancient and medieval physiology. We have the natural spirit in the liver, dealing with the nutrition and growth, vital spirit in the heart, associated with life and movement, and animal spirit in the brain, associated with sensation, imagination, and reason. The animal spirits were thought to be generated particularly in the ventricles and to travel through the nerves, enabling sensation and mental activity. Ficino considered the animal spirit to be crucial for the operations of the mind, acting as the medium through which the soul's intellectual and imaginative powers interact with the material world. He believed that images and thoughts produced by the imagination could affect the body and soul, not just of the thinker, but even of others, through a kind of spiritual radiation or emanation. Also, the brain was the seat of imaginative processing, where phantasms, mental images, were formed and interpreted. Ficino warned about disordered imagination, as it could lead to spiritual and bodily illness, a view influenced by both Platonic and medical traditions. Ficino had a famous preoccupation with melancholy, particularly in its connection with genius and divine madness. He believed melancholic individuals ruled by Saturn were especially prone to deep thought, creativity, and spiritual vision. Also, the black bile associated with melancholy was said to rise to the brain and affect its operations. Ficino thought that the brain's condition, especially the balance of humors within it, affected one's susceptibility to inspiration, prophecy, or madness. In Ficino's Neoplatonic cosmology, the human being is a microcosm, and each part of the body corresponds to a part of the universe. The brain is linked to the heavens, especially to the higher rational order. It is a vehicle through which the soul connects to the divine via contemplation and intellectual ascent. Hence, maintaining the health and purity of the brain and its spiritual counterpart, the spiritus, was important for a mystical elevation. Ficino's views on the brain were an original synthesis of Platonic metaphysics, especially the soul's divine origin and intellect, Aristotelian psychology, tripartite soul and faculties, Galenic and medieval medical theory, the ventricles, humors, and spirits, and Christian theology, which framed the brain's functions with a broader moral and spiritual struggle between reason, passion, and divine grace. Ficino saw the brain not simply as an organ, but as a key site of interaction between the immaterial soul and the material body, the generator and conduit of animal spirits, enabling thought, sensation, and imagination. The seat of imagination and reason, where the soul could reflect divine truths or fall into delusion. A symbolic and functional representation of higher faculties of the human being corresponding to the heavens in the cosmic order. A vulnerable center affected by humoral imbalances, which could either elevate the soul or lead it astray. And now we will talk a little bit about Ficino's ideas on death. Ficino's views on death and the afterlife are deeply rooted in Platonic philosophy, Christian theology, and his unique interpretation of Neoplatonism. As a Renaissance leading translator of Plato and Plotinus, Ficino crafted a worldview in which death is not an end but a return, a transformation and ascent of the soul back to its divine origin, death as the liberation of the soul. Ficino believed that the soul is divine, immortal, and separate from the body. Death is the moment when the soul is released from its temporary prison, the material body. Influenced by Plato's Phaedo, Ficino held that the body weighs down the soul, distracting it from contemplation and divine truth. At death, the soul returns to its natural, eternal state, ascending through the celestial spheres back to the intelligible realm, the world of ideas or divine mind. This process is not tragic but desirable for a soul that has lived philosophically and purified itself. Ficino wrote extensively on the soul's immortality, especially in his major work, Platonic Theology, on the immortality of souls. He argued that the soul is incorporeal, self-moving, and rational, thus cannot be destroyed by physical means. It comes from God, participates in divine reason, and naturally seeks union with the divine. The soul is eternal, not just surviving after death, but existing before embodiment, a belief in pre-existence derived from Platonic tradition. Ficino attempted to harmonize this with Christian doctrine, portraying immortality as a theological certainty as well as a philosophical truth. Ficino described the afterlife as a spiritual ascent through the celestial spheres. Drawing from Plotinus and Dante, he says, after death, the soul leaves the sublunary world. It ascends through the planetary spheres, shedding lower faculties. The purified soul ultimately reaches intellectual realm, where it contemplates divine truth and is united with God. This is not a vague heaven, but a state of intellectual and spiritual illumination. The soul becomes fully itself by returning to its origin. Ficino also believed that our fate after death depends on how we live. He believed the soul that devotes themselves to material things remain trapped in lower spheres after death or are reincarnated in bodies. Souls that cultivate virtue, reason, and divine love ascend to higher realms. He also links death to melancholy and contemplation. Those who reflect on death and eternity can begin their ascent even in life. For Ficino, philosophy is preparation for death, as it teaches the soul to detach from the body and contemplate eternal things. Ficino famously associated deep thinkers with Saturn, the planet of melancholy and transcendence. He saw melancholy as a divine affliction that draws the soul inward and upward toward eternity. Death becomes a Saturnian transformation, a moment when the soul, heavy with wisdom and weariness, crosses into the eternal world. This blends astrology, psychology, and mysticism into a spiritual archetype of the philosopher or mystic who faces death not with fear, but with longing. Though he was into pagan philosophy, Ficino was a devout Christian. He attempted to synthesize his Neoplatonism with Christian teachings. He affirmed belief in personal immortality, judgment, and eternal reward or punishment, though he emphasized contemplation and ascent more than physical resurrection. For Ficino, salvation is the soul's union with God, not just moral reward, but metaphysical fulfillment. He walked a tightrope between orthodoxy and mystical Platonism, presenting death as a spiritual transformation more than a final reckoning. But before we move on, here are two more quotes by Ficino. The soul exists partly in eternity and partly in time. The people who have discovered something important in any of the more noble arts have principally done so when they have abandoned the body and taken refuge in the citadel of the soul. And as we get closer to wrapping this up, there is a few more things I would like to talk about. one being Ficino's role in the Catholic Church. His role in the Catholic Church was multifaceted, encompassing his positions as a priest and canon, with his intellectual contributions as a philosopher and translator, and his influence on Christian thought, all while navigating occasional tensions with church authorities. Ficino's formal involvement in the Catholic Church began later in his career. In 1477, at the age of 44, he was ordained a priest, marking his entry into the clergy. Following his ordination, he was appointed as a canon of the Cathedral of Florence, a position that placed him within the church's hierarchical structure. Ficino's most enduring contribution to the church and Western thought was his translation of Plato's complete works into Latin, a huge task commissioned by his patron Cosimo de' Medici in the 1460s. Completed and published in 1484, this translation made Plato's dialogues accessible to the Latin-speaking world for the first time, sparking a revival of Platonic philosophy during the Renaissance. Alongside Plato, Ficino translated works by other Greek philosophers such as Plotinus. As a philosopher and theologian, Ficino sought to harmonize Platonic thought with a Christian doctrine. In his works like Platonic Theology in 1474 and On the Christian Religion in 1476, he argued that Christianity required a philosophical foundation, which he found in Plato's teachings. He emphasized concepts such as immortality of the soul and divine love, asserting that these ideas aligned with and reinforced Christian beliefs. Ficino even suggested that ancient pagan philosophers like Plato and Socrates were precursors to Christ, proposing that their wisdom could complement Christian revelation, a bold stance that reflected his deep reverence for classical thought. Ficino's ideas left a lasting imprint on Catholic theology. His concept of Platonic love derived from his commentary on Plato's Symposium. It reframed love as a spiritual and divine force, influencing Christian notions of charity and the soul's ascent to God. His emphasis on the soul's immortality also resonated with church teachings and gained formal recognition years after his death. In 1512, the Lateran Council under Pope Julius II affirmed the immortality of the soul as Catholic dogma, a development that echoed Ficino's earlier arguments. Ficino's work contributed to the rise of Christian humanism, a movement that sought to integrate classical learning with Christian faith. By making Greek philosophy accessible and demonstrating its compatibility with Christianity, he helped shape the intellectual climate of the Renaissance Church, encouraging a more philosophical approach to theology. Despite his contributions, Ficino's unorthodox interests occasionally brought him into conflict with the church. His fascination with astrology and his attempts to integrate pagan philosophy with Christianity raised suspicions. In 1489, he faced accusations of heresy before Pope Innocent VIII, primarily due to his writings on astrology and magic and works like De Vita on Life in 1489. Ficino was acquitted, likely due to his powerful Medici connections and his ability to frame his work with a Christian context. Marsilio Ficino's legacy within the Catholic Church is one of intellectual bridge building. His translations and writings revised interest in ancient Greek philosophy, making it a vital resource for Christian scholars. His efforts to reconcile Platonism with Christianity enriched theological discourse and influenced the development of Western philosophy. By promoting the immortality of the soul, divine love, and the value of philosophical inquiry, Ficino helped lay the groundwork for later theological and philosophical explorations. And as we wrap this episode up, I want to talk about how influential Ficino was and how he contributed to other people's thoughts, ideas, research, and teachings. We're going to start this list with Giovanni Pico della Mirandola. As a close associate of Ficino and a member of the Platonic Academy in Florence, Pico absorbed Ficino's syncretic approach, which combined the Platonic, Neoplatonic, and Hermetic ideas with Christian thought. Ficino's emphasis on the unity of truth across traditions inspired Pico's Oration on the Dignity of Man, a cornerstone of Renaissance humanism that celebrates human potential and the soul's divine nature, ideas rooted in Ficino's teachings. Giordano Bruno. Bruno drew heavily on Ficino's translations of the Corpus Hermeticum and his Neoplatonic concepts of the infinite universe and the soul's ascent to the divine. These ideas fueled Bruno's radical cosmology, including his belief in an infinite universe with multiple worlds, expanding Ficino's framework into a vision that challenged traditional church doctrine and contributed to his eventual martyrdom. Sandro Botticelli. A member of Ficino's intellectual circle, Botticelli was inspired by Ficino's ideas of Platonic love and beauty as a reflection of the divine. Paintings like The Birth of Venus and Primavera embody Neoplatonic symbolism, using beauty as a means to convey spiritual truths, directly reflecting Ficino's philosophical teachings. Baldassare Castiglione. Castiglione drew on Ficino's De Amore, which explores Platonic love as a pathway to the divine, to shape his depiction of ideal human relationships. In the Book of the Courtier, Castiglione presents love and refinement as a means of spiritual elevation, mirroring Ficino's view of beauty and affection as conduits to higher understanding. Ficino also influenced Christian humanists and theologians. Ficino's synthesis of Platonism and Christianity, particularly in his Theologia Platonica, influenced humanists like Erasmus and Thomas More, who sought out to integrate classical learning with religious reform. His idea that pagan wisdom prefigured Christian truths provided a model for more open, humanistic theology, encouraging broader education and dialogue within the church. Ficino's translation of the Corpus Hermeticum introduced Hermeticism into Renaissance Europe. Figures like Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa and John Dee built on Ficino's Hermeticism in their works on magic and alchemy, while the Rosicrucian movement later adopted his syncretic vision of spiritual transformation and universal wisdom. Paracelsus, Ficino's De Vita, which combined astrology, medicine, and philosophy, influenced his holistic approach to health and the human body. Paracelsus integrated Ficino's ideas about the interconnectedness of the cosmos and the individual into his medical theories, emphasizing spiritual and astrological factors in healing. Ficino's astrological insights, particularly his beliefs in celestial influences on human life, helped shape Renaissance astrology and cosmology. Thinkers like Johannes Kepler engaged with Ficino's ideas about cosmic harmony, blending them into an early scientific thought, even as they moved away from purely mystical interpretations. Marsilio Ficino's influence spanned philosophers, artists, theologians, esotericists, and early scientists, leaving a mark on the Renaissance and beyond. His translations of Plato and the Corpus Hermeticum made ancient wisdom accessible, while his original synthesis of diverse traditions provided a framework for new intellectual and artistic expression. From Pico della Mirandola's humanism to Botticelli's divine art, from Bruno's infinite cosmos to the Rosicrucian's mysticism, Ficino's ideas fostered a legacy of exploration, creativity, and the enduring quest to unite reason, faith, and beauty. For Marsilio Ficino, death was not destruction, it was initiation. The soul, cloaked in flesh, is tested, tempered, and prepared for ascent. Between the stars and the spirit, through the alchemy of thought and the music of the spheres, Ficino mapped the secret path across the threshold. As we leave his world behind, let us not forget, the philosopher is also a magician, and the truest wisdom is that which teaches the soul to remember what it once knew before the fall into time. The soul, Ficino wrote, is the bond of all things and the center of the world. To him, death was not a vanishing, but a rising, an untying of that bond so the soul could return to its source. In quotations, When the soul is free from the body, he said, it sees clearly, not with the eyes of the flesh, but with the light of the mind. Ficino's world was one where planets sang, where love moved the stars, and where philosophy was not mere thought, but a sacred practice, the preparation for death. And so, as we close this chapter on Marsilio Ficino, let us remember that to seek wisdom is to court the divine. To look inward is to rise, and to die, in his words, is to be born again into the light. And that is the end of another Occult Rejects. I hope you all enjoyed this and got something out of it. Everybody be well. Later.